I grew up hearing one sentence again and again, whispered like a warning, spoken like a curse. Never trust your sister. My mother said it so often that the words became the air of our home. I heard them while she braided my hair, while she cooked, while she pounded grain in the courtyard. Sometimes she said it softly, like a secret. Sometimes sharply, like an order. But always with a fire in her eyes that frightened me. When I was young, I didn't question her. Mothers know things daughters don't. At least, that's what I believed. My older sister, Amina, lived just across the compound in a hut my mother insisted I avoid. Even as children, there was a wall between us that I didn't build and didn't understand. Whenever I waved at her from across the yard, my mother's fingers tightened around my arm. Stay away from her. Why? I would ask. Her jaw always clenched the same way before she answered. She is not who you think she is. The villagers seemed to know something too. When I walked with my sister to fetch water, women exchanged glances. Some lowered their eyes. Others whispered behind calabash bowls. Elders watched us with a caution I couldn't explain. And my sister. She never looked angry at me. She looked hurt. Like someone who had already been punished. She tried to be kind. She offered to teach me the songs the girls sang at the river, the ones that echoed through the reeds during the cold season. But every time she approached me, my mother appeared from nowhere, pulling me back as if Amina carried a sickness. Don't let her touch you, she hissed. Her breath always trembled when she said it. I learned to step away. To keep my distance. To return her smile with caution. Because that's what daughters do, they obey. But Amina's eyes always followed me. Sad. Silent. Full of something I didn't yet understand. My mother was not always harsh. To outsiders, she was a respected woman, strong, skilled, attentive. But inside our home, there was a shadow in her heart that grew larger with each passing season. She watched me constantly. Studied me. Measured every word I spoke. But when she looked at my sister, something broke inside her. Her shoulders stiffened. Her face darkened. Her hands trembled. Sometimes she even dropped whatever she was holding. It was as if Amina's presence awakened a memory she could not control. One afternoon, when the sun was low and the chickens were settling in the dust, I heard them arguing inside the ancestral hut, a place my mother rarely entered despite its importance in our traditions. I shouldn't have listened. But their voices were sharp enough to split the air. How long will you blame me? Amina's voice cracked. I was a child too. You don't get to say that, my mother screamed. You ruined everything. My heart pounded as I pressed my ear against the mud wall. I had never heard my mother sound so afraid. You think I wanted it to happen? My sister asked, voice trembling. My mother's sob cut through the silence like a blade. You should never have been there. You should never have seen it. You should never have. Then she stopped abruptly, as if swallowing a truth too dangerous to say out loud. I covered my mouth with my hand, breath shaking. I didn't understand the words, but I felt the weight behind them. Amina ran out of the hut moments later, her face wet with tears. When she saw me, she froze. I'm sorry, she whispered. Sorry for what? I had no idea. My mother stumbled out afterward, her face ash-gray, her hands trembling so violently she could barely hold on to the hut's doorway. When she noticed me, her voice hardened. Go home. Mother, what happened? Go. I ran. That night, I lay awake listening to the insects outside and the quiet crackle of the dying fire. My mother sat by the doorway, staring into nothing, her eyes swollen from crying. She didn't look strong. Or strict. Or angry. She looked terrified. Mother? I whispered. She didn't turn her head. But after a long moment, she spoke softly. You must never let your sister close. If you do, everything I've tried to protect will fall apart. Her voice broke on the last word. Protect me from what? I asked. She shook her head slowly. You're too young. You wouldn't understand. But her tone told me something she never said aloud. She wasn't protecting me from my sister. She was protecting herself from something they both knew. Something that happened before I was born. Years passed, but the tension never eased. My mother grew more controlling, more fearful, more unpredictable. My sister became quieter, carrying her guilt like a basket of stones she was forced to hold forever. And I grew more confused. Why did my mother tremble at the sight of her own daughter? Why did my sister carry a sorrow too heavy for someone so young? Why did the ancestral hut, the sacred place of our family, remain sealed to me but not to them? Something happened inside those walls. Something that shaped my entire childhood long before I even entered this world. And one day, I would discover exactly what it was. But on that day, the day it all finally made sense. My entire life shattered, piece by piece. And I learned the truth. The hatred I inherited was never mine to carry. The older I grew, the more impossible it became to ignore the tension inside my home. The air felt heavy, like something unspoken lived between the three of us, breathing through the walls, waiting to be named. My mother tried to hide it behind rules. Rules about where I could walk. Rules about when I could speak. Rules about who I could trust. But most of all, do not let Amina into your heart. She said it with a kind of desperation that frightened me more than any warning about real danger. It wasn't fear for me. It was fear of what I might discover. It started with small things. My sister always reached out to me, in ways that felt warm, familiar, and sincere. If she cooked a pot of stew, she sent me a share. If she returned from the river with ripe fruit, she left some by our doorway. I never returned the gesture. Not because I didn't want to. But because my mother watched me like a guard dog ready to attack. One afternoon, when my mother fell asleep early, I slipped outside. I found Amina washing pots behind her hut. She looked up, startled, then smiled. It was the kind of smile someone gives when they've waited years for a single moment. You came, she said. I shouldn't be here, I whispered. I know, she replied softly. You never are. We didn't speak about my mother. We didn't speak about the fights. We didn't speak about the ancestral hut. Instead, she told me stories. Stories about the forest spirits. Stories about the market days in far villages. Stories about the dreams she used to have when she was my age. I felt something unfamiliar, comfort. When I returned home, my mother was waiting by the doorway, eyes sharp, lips trembling with fury. Where were you? I just went for a walk. Don't lie to me, she shouted. I know where you were. I can smell her herbs on your clothes. My heart dropped. How could she know something like that? She stepped closer, her voice lowering into a kind of cold panic. Do not speak to her again. Do you hear me? Mother, she's my sister. She is not your sister, my mother screamed so loudly the chickens scattered. Then she froze, realizing what she had said. For a moment, neither of us breathed. I opened my mouth to ask what she meant, but she grabbed my wrist so tightly it hurt. Forget what I said, she whispered. Forget it right now. But I couldn't. I wouldn't. Her words cracked something open in my mind. And once a crack forms, it never stops spreading. After that day, I began to notice details I had never paid attention to before, tiny clues hidden in everyday life. I noticed how the elders avoided meeting Amina's eyes. I noticed how women hushed their voices when she walked past. I noticed how children were warned not to ask questions about her childhood. And I noticed something else. Whenever my mother walked near the ancestral hut, her entire body tensed. Not with respect, but with dread. Why was she afraid of a sacred place meant to honor our family? Why did Amina sometimes sit outside that hut, staring at the doorway with eyes full of sorrow? And why, above everything else, did I feel as if my life began in that place, even though I had never stepped inside? One night, the moon hung low over the village, large and red like an ember. I lay awake, listening to the restless wind, when I heard footsteps outside. Soft. Careful. Familiar. I peeked through the cracks of our hut. It was my mother. She moved as if guided by something painful and unavoidable. Her shadow stretched across the ground as she walked to the ancestral hut. Her hands trembled as she held a small clay bowl. She kneeled by the entrance. And for the first time, I heard her cry without holding anything back. Not the quiet sobbing she showed in front of people. Not the frustrated tears I had seen when she argued with Amina. This was different. This was grief raw, ancient, drowning her from the inside. She whispered into the bowl. I did what I had to do. Please forgive me. Please forgive me. I had no choice. The words struck me like a blow. Forgive her for what? What choice had she taken? Who, or what, was she speaking to? Before I could think, the door of Amina's hut opened. She stepped into the moonlight, her face pale with sadness. She approached slowly, stopping a short distance from our mother. You came again, she said softly. Mother stiffened. Go back inside. Why do you do this to yourself? Amina whispered. Because I have to, my mother replied. Because of what we did. My breath caught. What we did. Together. This was no longer a story about my mother's hatred. This was a secret they both shared. Amina knelt beside her. You don't have to punish yourself forever. My mother shook her head violently. I can't forget. I can't forgive myself. And I can't let her. Her voice cracked. I can't let her ever know. I knew she was talking about me. I felt it in my bones. Amina wiped her mother's tears, and my mother didn't pull away. It was the first time I had seen them touch without anger or fear. It didn't look like hatred. It looked like guilt. Deep, destructive guilt that chained them together. I stepped back from the window, heart pounding. Nothing made sense. Yet at the same time, everything made sense. My mother's fear. Her anger. Her obsession. Her hatred. Her rules. Her screams. Her warnings. Her trembling hands whenever Amina walked into a room. It wasn't because Amina was dangerous. It wasn't because Amina was wicked. It wasn't because I needed protection. It was because of something that happened before I was born. Something they both witnessed. Something they both carried. And something they both wished I would never discover. But I already knew. The truth lived in the ancestral hut. And I would find it. Even if it destroyed everything. The night after I saw my mother and sister outside the ancestral hut, sleep abandoned me completely. My heart beat in uneven rhythms, as if trying to warn me that the truth I wanted so desperately was also the truth that would break me. But I had no choice anymore. The lies had stretched too far. The cracks in our family were no longer invisible. Every shadow whispered the same thing. Go to the hut. Go find what they're hiding. When the moon reached its highest point, I stepped outside. The village slept, even the goats were silent. Only the wind remained awake, swirling dust around my feet like it wanted to follow me. My legs trembled as I approached the ancestral hut. My family's oldest place. Our secret's oldest grave. I pushed the wooden door gently. It opened with a creak sharp enough to slice the night. Inside, I smelled dust, old smoke, and something else. Something sorrowful. Memories, maybe. Regret, perhaps. A single clay jar sat in the middle of the floor. Painted. Cracked. Wrapped with a thread of dried grass that looked older than I was. I lifted it. Inside were folded palm leaves, stained with time. I opened the first one. The handwriting was my mother's. I can't live with what we did. My breath caught. My hands shook. I opened the next leaf. Amina wasn't supposed to see. She was too young. She didn't understand what he planned. He? Who was he? The hut suddenly felt colder. I read the third leaf with trembling fingers. She tried to stop him, but she couldn't. And I wasn't there in time. My chest tightened so hard I could barely breathe. I opened another. If the elders ever found out what happened between them in this hut, both of us would have been cast out. My pregnancy would have been called a curse. Pregnancy. My pregnancy. My vision blurred. I forced my eyes to the next line. I begged them to call the child mine. I begged them to erase what happened. To erase the night that Amina saw. I dropped the leaf. It fluttered to the floor like a dying bird. Footsteps approached behind me. I turned sharply, and saw Amina standing in the doorway, tears shining on her cheeks in the moonlight. "You weren't supposed to read that," she whispered. My throat tightened. What happened here? She stepped inside slowly, as if entering a memory she feared. Her voice trembled. I was 8. Silence swallowed the room. My heart pounded in my chest. She continued. Mother used to come here for cleansing rituals. One night, she was with a man she trusted, someone from the extended family. Someone she believed would protect her. Her breath hitched. He didn't. The words struck me like a spear. I felt the ground shift beneath me. Amina wiped her eyes with shaking hands. I saw it happen. I tried to stop him, I screamed, I threw stones, but I was a child. He pushed me aside and told me to keep quiet. He told me it was normal. He told me Mother wanted it. She clenched her fists. Mother didn't know I'd seen. My stomach twisted violently. And then, she whispered, Mother found out she was pregnant. My vision blurred. Pregnant. With me. I staggered back, the truth hitting me with the force of a collapsing world. No. But the truth didn't care what I wanted. Amina nodded, tears dripping onto the dirt floor. The elders told her that if anyone learned the child was from an act of violence inside the ancestral hut, it would bring disgrace to the clan. They said the land would reject the child. They said the ancestors would curse us. I shook my head, trembling. Why did she tell me to hate you? Amina stepped closer, voice cracking. Because I was the one who saw. I was the one who knew. And every time she looked at me, she remembered that night. The shame. The fear. The man. The truth. She swallowed hard. And every time she looked at you, she remembered what came after. It felt like something inside me tore open. I pressed my hands to my chest. Why didn't she tell me? Amina sobbed. She thought if you ever learned what happened, you'd hate yourself. You'd think you were born of violence. You'd think you were a mistake. Her words shattered the last piece of my heart. I sank to the ground. Amina knelt beside me, her hands trembling as she reached for mine. I never hated you, she whispered. I hated that she made you fear me. I hated that she carried this alone. I hated that she punished herself every day for something she never chose. The jar lay beside us. The leaves scattered like dead feathers. And for the first time, the weight of my entire life made sense. My mother's rage. Her fear of the hut. Her trembling hands. Her hatred for my sister. Her suffocating need to protect me. Her refusal to ever tell me the truth. She wasn't protecting herself from me. She was protecting me from a past she wished never existed. I closed my eyes, tears burning my face. I shouldn't have been born, I whispered. Amina grabbed my shoulders. Don't say that. You didn't cause what happened. You were the only good thing that came out of that night. I sobbed, deep, heavy, painful sobs that echoed through the hut like mourning. When the tears finally stopped, Amina wrapped her arms around me. You were born from pain, she whispered. But you don't have to live in it. A soft breeze moved through the hut, lifting the leaves on the floor like the ancestors themselves were exhaling. For the first time, I felt the truth settle inside me, painful, but real. I wasn't born into hatred. I inherited it. I lived inside it. But now, I understood it. And understanding is the first step to breaking it. When I walked out of the ancestral hut with my sister by my side, I felt something my mother never could. The weight lifting. The darkness loosening. The beginning of healing.